Rappers dabbling in rock is not a new phenomenon. You had Run DMC remixing Aerosmith all the way back in the 80s, as well as Public Enemy collaborating with Anthrax in the early 90s. Then of course you had the Judgment Night soundtrack, which featured collaborations between 90s rock bands and rappers, like Pearl Jam and Cypress Hill. Then of course you had the advent of nu metal, which fused elements of hip-hop and heavy metal. More recently, you have artists like Machine Gun Kelly going from rap to pop punk, and everyone from Lil Wayne to Kid Cudi to Lil Yachty, all having rock albums, with varying degrees of quality, of course.
It's time to stop!
But I've recently come across a rapper whose rock side project blew me away.
How did I not know about this before?
I don't know, but now that I do know, you also have to know. That's how this works.
Oh, what a lie. Oh, what a lie.
Hello and welcome back to another video. If you're new here, I'm Trevor and I am eternally uncool. I make videos about music, music culture, and anything that interests me. Mostly music right now. So if that sounds like something you'd be into, then I highly recommend subscribing to the channel and watching the rest of this video. I've been a fan of rock music since I grew ears as a child. It was always the kind of music that everyone in my family listened to. Whether it was classic rock from my parents, or heavy metal and punk and indie rock from my brothers, or the emo and alternative rock that I would dive into as a teenager. I've been a fan of hip-hop less longer. I didn't really get into hip-hop until I was in high school and I discovered the song Chum by Earl Sweatshirt. And then of course that led me into all of Odd Future's music. And after that I would just discover a whole new world of music that I had never experienced before, exposing me to artists that would become idols of mine, like Mac Miller and Tyler the Creator. And like I said in the intro, a lot of rappers have tried their hand at rock music. Some of it's good. I actually kind of like MGK's Tickets to My Downfall. And Lil Yachty's Let's Start Here was a surprisingly great foray into psychedelia. But then you have stuff like Speeding Bullet to Heaven, Supermarket, and Lil Wayne's Rebirth.
You don't want to be like this. This is disgusting. This is awful in every way.
But recently I found out that a rapper that I was kind of just a casual fan of had a rock side project that I had never heard of before. And of course, wanting to see if this was one of the more listenable rock projects from a rapper or complete
Booty cheeks.
I checked it out. And I gotta say, I have opinions. What I want to do today is take a look at rapper Lupe Fiasco's rock side project, Japanese Cartoon, and their 2010 album, In the Jaws of the Lords of Death. With all that being said, grab a drink, grab a snack, get comfortable, and let's get into the video. Now before we go into Japanese Cartoon, I think I need to give you guys a little bit of a background on Lupe Fiasco, the rapper. We'll look at his rise and where he was at in his career when he started this side project. Okay?
Okay.
Lupe Fiasco was born, I'm gonna fucking butcher his name and I'm so sorry, Wasilu Muhammad Jocko, we'll just call him Lupe, on February 16th, 1982 in Chicago, Illinois. He was exposed to music at a very young age through his father, who was an African drummer. And his father had a very eclectic taste, introducing his son to rap group NWA, as well as Indian sitarist Ravi Shankar. Initially, Lupe didn't like rap because it was too vulgar. Instead, he preferred jazz. He wanted to play an instrument, but just couldn't seem to master any of them.
Same.
So instead, he turned to writing poetry. Lupe's opinion on rap would change in the 8th grade when he discovered Nas's second album, It Was Written. He started rapping the poems that he had written. And after making friends with fellow music lover Bishop G, the two started making mixtapes together. Initially, they weren't really accepted by the Chicago hip-hop and rap community for being too eclectic But that didn't deter Lupe. At 19, Lupe would join a rap group called The Pack. And the group was actually signed to Epic Records and released a single before splitting up. Lupe felt like Depac's music wasn't really representative of him. He felt like a hypocrite singing about women and guns and stuff like that. He wanted to do something that was more him, more genuine. So he would move on to a more lyrical approach.
I'm a spiritual, lyrical, individual, spiritual, lyrical.
And eventually he would sign a solo deal with Arista, where he would meet Jay-Z. Jay-Z would call him a breath of fresh air. And after Lupe was dropped from Arista due to a change in management, Jay-Z got him a deal with Atlantic Records. By 2006, Lupe Fiasco had a lot of attention and connections within the music industry. He released his debut album, Lupe Fiasco's Food and Liquor. The album would receive critical acclaim. So Lupe Fiasco was becoming the fresh new face of hip-hop. He was a bold newcomer with a fresh sound who wasn't afraid to be vulnerable and introspective. It was even nominated for Best Rap Album at the Grammys in 2007, but lost to Ludacris.
Which is ludicrous, if you ask me.
His second album in 2007, The Cool, would show how ambitious Lupe was, being a concept album.
What the hell are you talking about?
This is all just a long way of saying that Lupe Fiasco was doing very well. He was a pretty well-established name in hip-hop by 2010. But by the summer of 2010, Lupe Fiasco wanted to try something different. On Lupe Fiasco's first two albums, he featured an artist by the name of Matthew Santos. Santos was a Minneapolis-based singer-songwriter and guitar player. He studied music composition at Columbia University, so he's legit. Fiasco started writing songs that were different from his usual hip-hop style, and he showed them to Santos. Like I said in my little background on the guy, Lupe couldn't play any instruments. So he would have Santos help him out a bit. Santos would recruit two members of his own band to help flesh out the songs. And Lupe brought in his friend, Les Messi, for production. And eventually they would form an actual band. In 2010, rappers forming a rock band wasn't really a thing. Sure, you had some collaboration between rappers and rockers, but for a rapper to do a straight-up rock band was very unusual. I will say though, a lot of rappers are very well versed in rock music and rock culture. And Lupe Fiasco did say that he was a fan of all music, but that hip-hop was what he was best at. But he decided that since he had achieved so much in hip-hop, why not give rock a try? This switch-up caused a lot of media to believe that Lupe Fiasco was abandoning his roots. Essentially pulling an MGK before MGK.
You fucking suck. Hey!
And trust me, Lupe tried his damnedest to keep this low-key. The band's website did not list Grammy-nominated rapper Lupe Fiasco as the frontman, instead listing someone named Percival Hindenburg Fats.
Who?
Lupe was just credited as a kind of financial backer who really believed in the band. But an eagle-eyed, or eagle-ear in this case, listener would check out Japanese Cartoon and find a lot of similarities between the singer and Lupe Fiasco. And once it got out that Lupe Fiasco was doing rock music, MTV and the NME just jumped on the speculation train. Lupe explained that he didn't want the band to be viewed as a side project. He wanted it to be organic, like it came out of nowhere. He wanted honest opinions and reactions to the music, not the reactions that an already established artist would get. He genuinely wanted this to be an organically successful band. In 2010, Japanese Cartoon would release their first and only album, In the Jaws of the Lords of Death. The album itself is super interesting in terms of sound. It mixes the kind of post-punk of a band like Block Party with a little bit of electronica and a little bit of punk rock. Lupe sings in this fake British accent that sounds really odd, but also kind of works. Apparently he did this to pay tribute to legendary 80s post-punk band Joy Division and their legendary frontman Ian Curtis. The opening track, Jaws in all caps, has this kind of old school British punk sound that reminds me of Sex Pistols, mixed with some 80s style hair metal guitar licks. Lupe's vocals are energetic and snotty, very appropriate for this style of music. It's a good opener, very cool. The second track, All Sabotage, continues with the punk aesthetic while also incorporating some electronic elements. There's also a kind of indie vibe to this track that wouldn't sound out of place if done by a band like the Libertines.
Now my head's all fuzzy and my body's all numb and my wheels all busted and my mind's all dumb and I can't think straight with your rifle in my face and suspicion in the air that oppression's at the gate. Bow to the women, the directors of the state, kowtow to the wisdom of suppressors of your fate. Die for your possessions even though they all fake. You're blind now, hope you find out, something to shine out.
Airplanes is probably one of the coolest songs on the entire album. It has a super dark and moody opening with just a bass riff and Lupe's vocals. It's really eerie and kind of suspenseful, but at the 1 minute mark it kicks into a full-on punk jam.
Oh, what a lie. Oh, what a lie.
Beijing opens with a riff that kind of reminds me of My Chemical Romance. It's very punky, but also has a modern rock vibe. Lupe has kind of dropped the fake British accent at this point in the album, but his regular voice really works.
She was a morphine fling, full from the ring. She had 14 drinks and 14 dreams in one night.
Track 4, Crowd Participation, is alright. The riff is good, but I just feel like the energy isn't really there. Lupe's vocals feel so low in the mix, and the electronics on this one almost completely hinder the song. But it's not really that bad. It's not the best track on the album, but it's also like not the worst thing I've heard. Firing Squad is another really cool song with a great opening riff that really reminds me of something Ray Toro would have done around the Three Cheers era. Lupe's vocals are energetic and lively. The rest of the band plays fast and quick. It's really reminiscent of late 70s and early 80s punk rock.
When they put you on, you better run, you better run, you better run. When they put you
You Are Here starts with a much heavier riff than anything that's been on the album thus far. It almost sounds like hard rock as opposed to post-punk. I was honestly kind of blown away by how much I like this track. Was not expecting that. Eighth track, Army, all caps, has that classic post-punk sound. Lupe brings the British accent back. The guitar riff is really cool, very minimal. I like the addition of a tambourine in the mix, that was cool. Definitely sounds like a Block Party B-side. The final track, Gasp, is the longest on the album, clocking in at 4 minutes and 30 seconds, which isn't that long. I don't know why I made it sound like it was like 10 minutes. It's a lot more atmospheric than their other songs, incorporating sirens in the opening. The guitar and bass riff are really cool. leaning more into an alternative rock sound. Lupe fully ditches the British accent now, and sings in a more mellow fashion. I really like this one. It reminds me of a mix between Block Party, Audio Slave, and 2000s era U2. It's definitely the most ambitious song on the album, and shows what Lupe and Japanese cartoons could have done. In 2015, producer Lemessy posted that Japanese Cartoons was working on their second album titled Milk is for Pussies. I like milk, I don't know why you gotta be rude about it. But the album never came. There's no tracks or snippets of tracks available. I read a Medium article, which I had to create an account to even read, which is fucking bullshit, but it didn't tell me anything. Nothing about the second album, nothing about why the project ended, nothing at all. At this point, it seemed like Japanese Cartoons was all but finished. Which sucks because there's a lot of fans who want the band to come back. A year ago, there was a post on the Lupe Fiasco subreddit that read, "Japanese Cartoons must return." And Lupe himself even said that he would love to return to the project at some point.
Do it! Just do it!
In my opinion, Japanese Cartoon was a really interesting side quest. Lupe Fiasco was a big name in the 2000s hip-hop world. To see him step out of his comfort zone and try something so unlike what we heard from him before is just mind-blowing. Lupe, Matthew Santos, and the other members of the band definitely created something special that reached a surprising amount of people. Japanese Cartoon is an underrated band. They came out at a time when the mainstream rock and pop world wasn't ready for a band fronted by someone who was mainly known as a rapper. They were ahead of their time. I think if they came out today, they would have a lot more attention and appeal. Japanese Cartoon would have flourished in the 2020s, but they were just too ahead of their time. If you're a fan of post-punk and 70s British punk, I highly recommend giving Japanese Cartoon a listen. I think the sheer uniqueness of the album will at least give you something to enjoy and admire. I know it did for me.
This right here is my favorite thing ever. In the history of forever. I think about this every day. I think about this all night long. I stay awake, not sleeping, because I'm thinking about this.
Are you a Japanese Cartoon fan? And no, I'm not talking about anime. What about Lupe Fiasco? You a fan of his? Do you think this project will ever come back? Especially now when people are more kind of open to rappers and just musical artists in general doing something different. Let me know in the comments. That's gonna do it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, then I highly recommend smashing that like button and sharing this video with everyone you know. Like I said before, I'm a small, independent content creator who pretty much does everything on his own. So every like, every comment, every share, any interaction with this video at all really helps me out a lot. With all that being said, thank you for watching. As always, I'm Trevor. Stay uncool. And that's the end of the video. Goodbye.